Hello, this is Sean Thomas, and today I'll be going over my Sprint 2 presentation for my team's capstone. So Sprint retrospective, what I completed was I fixed the issues with the rocks being capped behind the boat from last sprint, and so now they will spawn in front of the boat so that the boat has a chance to hit them and the user must dodge them. Um, I added a new class that can now play sounds on top of gameplay. So now there's background music and different sound effects and ambient noise. Um, Another thing that I fixed um, was the debugging mode for the camera to look around everywhere because in my specific gameplay, I don't want the user to be able to control the camera. Um, the camera should be fixed behind the boat in third person. Then I added boat health, and this is built on top of the collision mechanism from last sprint, so that if the boat hits a certain amount of rocks, it will end the game. And then I added win-loss conditions. Just going back to the boat health. So if the boat has less health than the amount of health allowed, um, then it will automatically close the game. But if they have enough health and then they reach the end of the level, then they will win. Some blockers, the rendering system for health bars didn't work, so that's a feature that I want for next sprint to have a visual indicator for the user to see how much health they have. So here's my burn down chart. So add background music was one task, and that was 3 points. Prevent camera from rotating was 2 points. Add boat health when hitting rocks was 2 points. And then prevent rocks spawn from being capped behind the boat was 4 points. So most of my time went towards fixing the bugs from last sprint, and then most of my time was also spent writing out the class for um, the sounds, and then a few other things were just quality of life stuff. So you can see here, here's my burn down chart. Um, I met all the goals, so everything's pretty much below the line. So breakdown of labor, most of my time went into building the music class to get sound effects inside of my main code. And then 25% of my time went to fixing the rock and ship collision bugs, which goes hand in hand to fixing the spawning mechanism. And then the win-loss conditions wasn't too bad, so it was 15%. And then updating the camera to be able to not move around was also not too bad, so it was only 15%. So new features I'm going to demo. The rocks will now spawn randomly in front of the boat. You're going to hear ambient ocean sounds. You're going to hear rock crashing sound effects. Um, Background music. Game over when the boat health is low, and then when you reach the end. Um, you're also going to see the actual collision effects. Um, or I guess actual collision logic. You'll see rocks despawn. And this was technically a task from last sprint, but because of the blocker, it couldn't actually show it, but it should now be shown um, as I fixed the blocker from last sprint. So I'm going to go ahead and demo my project. You can see here, I can move left and right, but I can't move my mouse around. I'm moving my mouse around, but it doesn't do anything, and that's intentional. I don't want the user to be able to look around. They should only look at the boat in third person. As you can see now rocks will disappear when you hit them, and you'll also hear sound effects. And when you hit a certain amount of rocks, as you can see, the game ends, and you get this output. Um, but if I go ahead and I beat the game, um, it'll take a minute or two to beat the game. But in the meantime, you can hear the ocean ambient sounds, and you can also hear the background music. And you also heard the rock collision noises. As you can see here, the rocks will now spawn randomly in front of the boat. Um, so this makes the user have to move around and try to dodge the rocks. And I believe that's all the features I want to test out. Um, but you should see that when we reach the end, um, there will be a terminal output saying that we reached Malta. So don't die. And the background music is from Williams Tower Defense Battles. It's an older game, but I thought the music really fit the game. It's taking a lot longer than I thought it would. I guess I made it too long, but as you can see here, when the window closes, it says that you will reach the island of Malta. So that's expected. So now I'm going to just run through some code. Um, so the camera object class, just really quickly, what I did here is I added this variable to automatically make the mouse movement true. But you can disable it to be false if you want. And then in here, now it says if it's enabled, it allows you to move around. If it's not enabled, you can't move around. So that's how I got that fixed pretty easily. And in here, I simply added this to allow prevent it from moving. Um, and then, so here's the sound manager class. Um, so this is the background music, pretty much, and then it has volume control. This is pretty much done with uh, a native Java library. Um, and then here's ambient. So essentially what this is just ambient sound effects. So you can have multiple if you want. Same with effects. Ambient will play just in the background on top of music, and then sound effects will happen um, when they're prompted in the code. And then so here's the function to play some music, and then you can stop the music as well, and you can change the volume. You can set the volume. You can load ambient noises, so this will pretty much register it, but it won't necessarily play it. This function will play the music or play the ambient noise, and then stop it, and then volume, and then here's all the same code for effects. So you can load the effect but not play it. You can play the effect, and this is for um, just for the normal sound, background sound. And then here's shutdown, which shuts down all the audios. Um, so then here's boat health, which I believe is new. And this detects when the boat or when the game should stop if there is more or less boat health. I already mentioned the prevent camera rotation to stop the camera from moving. Um, Here's the sound manager, so you can instantiate the new sound manager. Um, you can add the music and then set the volume, and then you can register the waves and then start playing it. and set the volume for it. And then here you can load the effect, but you won't start playing it. Um, and then here's the logic for running. If the boat health is still above 0 when the game is done running, then you reach the island of Malta. Otherwise, you crash before reaching Malta. And this logic right here, um, while the boat health is above 0, and then the position of the boat is greater than the position's minimum bounds, dot get x, which means the boat is still inside the scene and hasn't reached Malta, quote unquote. And while the reason it's greater than is because the boat is technically moving in the negative direction, so we're going until we reach the minimum bounds, which is why if it's larger, it's considered in bounds. And then, so that's pretty much the win-loss logic right here. Um, and then here's the rock generation from last sprint. It's pretty much the same. There's not much of a difference. Maybe I think the values might have changed a little bit, but the logic is pretty much the same. Um, so then the way it works is a rock is generated at the boat's position, X position, minus the rock's displacement. Again, minus rock because we're moving in the negative direction instead of the positive one. And then there's a random Z value to go on the X-axis, even though technically it's the Z-axis, but the way the boat's positioned. And then there's bounding boxes and mass physics and all that. And then, so right here is a collision logic. Um, so anytime any rock hits the boat, we play the sound effect for a crash, and then we print boat hits rock, and then you remove that current rock, and then you destroy the game logic, and you lower the boat's health. Um, so also when the game closes, we also turn the sound off, um, so that everything's cleaned up correctly. And that's pretty much all the code that I believe is different to demonstrate this time. So what's for next print? I want to add both health power-ups, so that if your boat gets damaged by the rocks, you can pick up spawned items, and then it should restore your boat health. And then I also want to add a visual health bar if that's possible, so the user has an indicator of how much health their boat has. And also probably a few quality of life bugs here and there for next sprint. So that's everything I wanted to demonstrate for this video.